I watched my stepsister Emma cradle Mr. Buttons against her chest, her perfectly manicured fingers stroking the worn fur of the teddy bear that had been mine, truly mine, in another lifetime. The bear my dying grandmother had sewn for me with her last strength, every stitch a prayer for my happiness. The bear my stepmother had donated to Emma's charity drive 3 days after I died in that car accident they'd arranged, but they didn't know I remembered everything. Such a ratty old thing, Emma said, wrinkling her nose at the photographers assembled in our family's grand foyer. But it means so much to the underprivileged children, doesn't it? My heart just breaks for them. She posed with Mr. Buttons, her smile practiced and perfect for the cameras documenting her generous donation to her latest philanthropic venture. The same smile she'd worn at my funeral, my first funeral 16 months ago. I stood in the shadows of the curved staircase, 17 years old again, watching the scene unfold exactly as I remembered it. Except this time, I wasn't the broken girl begging for scraps of love from a family that saw me as nothing but an inconvenience. This time, I knew every betrayal that was coming, every lie, every theft, every calculated cruelty. This time, I was ready. Meredith, my stepmother Patricia's voice cut through the air like a whip. Stop lurking and make yourself useful. Go help Maria prepare the refreshments for our guests. The reporters' cameras didn't even turn my direction. Why would they? I was just the forgotten stepdaughter, the awkward girl in the oversized sweater, the ghost in my own home. That's what I'd been before. The invisible one. The one whose college fund had been redirected to Emma's luxury car. The one whose room had been converted into a walk-in closet because Emma needed more space. The one who died thinking maybe somehow she'd deserved it all. I smiled and nodded obediently. Yes, Patricia. Let them think I was still that girl. Let them believe they'd won before the game even started. In my previous life, this charity event had been the beginning of the end for me. Emma had donated Mr. Buttons along with a dozen other items of mine, things she'd convinced Patricia were just clutter. And when I'd objected, my father had slapped me for the first time. Told me I was selfish. Told me Emma's charity work was more important than my sentimental attachments to junk. 3 months later, they'd tampered with my car's brakes, made it look like an accident. My father's insurance policy on me had been substantial, and with me gone, Emma would inherit everything, including the trust fund my real mother had set up for me, the one I'd only learned about 2 weeks before my death when a lawyer had accidentally sent documents to our house instead of his office. I died not knowing that I'd been worth $10 million, that my stepfamily had been systematically stealing from me for years, siphoning money from the trust through forged documents and bribed officials. I died thinking I was worthless, but death had given me an unexpected gift. When I'd opened my eyes in the hospital after what should have been a fatal case of pneumonia at age 15, 2 years before the car accident, I'd remembered everything. Every moment of my previous life, every betrayal, every theft, and every single detail of how they'd killed me. The doctors called it a miracle recovery. Patricia called it inconvenient. Emma called it annoying. My father didn't call it anything because he didn't visit the hospital at all. I called it a second chance. For 2 years, I'd been planning, watching, documenting, playing the role of the meek, forgettable stepdaughter, while I slowly, methodically gathered every piece of evidence I needed to destroy them. The forged documents Patricia had used to access my trust, the bribes my father had paid to lawyers and judges, the affair Emma was having with my father's business partner, the same partner who'd helped them plan my murder, every secret, every crime, every lie. I'd learned to be patient in death. Now, in life, that patience was about to pay off. As I walked toward the kitchen, I felt the familiar weight of the phone in my pocket. Not my regular phone, the one they occasionally checked to make sure I wasn't causing trouble. This was a burner, untraceable, loaded with enough evidence to send all 3 of them to prison for the rest of their lives. Bank records, email chains, audio recordings from the tiny devices I'd hidden throughout the house, video footage from the cameras disguised as ordinary objects in every room. In my previous life, I'd been the victim. In this one, I was the hunter. Maria, I said softly as I entered the kitchen. Our housekeeper looked up from the canapes she was arranging, her weathered face creasing with concern when she saw me. Mija, she whispered. You look pale. Are you feeling well? Maria was the only person in this house who'd ever shown me genuine kindness. In my previous life, she'd been fired 2 weeks after my death when she'd started asking too many questions about my accident. Patricia had called her paranoid. My father had called her a troublemaker. Emma had laughed and said good riddance. In this life, Maria was going to be well taken care of. I'm fine, I assured her, taking her hand and pressing a small envelope into it. But I need you to do something for me. Tomorrow morning, I need you to take a vacation. A long one. Use what's in this envelope and go visit your sister in Mexico. Stay there for at least 2 weeks. Maria's eyes widened as she felt the thickness of the envelope. Meredith, I cannot. Please. I squeezed her hand. Trust me, you need to be away from here, far away. What's about to happen? I don't want you caught in the crossfire. She searched my face, and I saw the moment she understood. Maria had always been more perceptive than my family gave her credit for. You are planning something? I'm planning justice, I corrected. They took everything from me, Maria, everything, and I'm taking it all back. She nodded slowly, tucking the envelope into her apron. Your grandmother, God rest her soul, she told me once that you had her strength. Her fire. I see it now, in your eyes. My grandmother, the only blood relative who'd loved me unconditionally. The woman who died of cancer when I was 8, before my father had remarried, before everything had turned to poison. She'd spent her final week sewing Mr. Buttons for me, telling me stories about how she'd fled an abusive husband with nothing but her courage and her wits, how she'd built a successful business from nothing, how she'd made sure her daughter, my mother, would never know poverty or fear. My mother had died in childbirth with me. My father had loved her genuinely, I think, but that love had died with her. What was left was a weak, bitter man who'd let Patricia manipulate him, who'd chosen a new wife's approval over his own daughter's welfare. My grandmother's trust fund was her last gift to me. Blood money earned through her own suffering and determination. Money my stepfamily had been stealing for years. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't know because I'd only discovered it myself in this life, was that my grandmother had been far more successful than anyone realized. The trust fund they'd been siphoning wasn't even her main fortune. That wealth, the real wealth, had been hidden away in offshore accounts and real estate holdings under a separate entity. And when I'd turned 15 in this life, I'd inherited it all through a quiet transfer that required nothing but my biometric signature at a private bank in Switzerland. I was, without my family's knowledge, one of the wealthiest teenagers in the country, and I'd spent every penny wisely, building my revenge brick by brick. Go tomorrow, I told Maria again, please, and thank you for everything. She kissed my forehead. Your grandmother's watching over you, Mija. I feel it. I hoped she was right. I hoped my grandmother and my mother were both watching. I hoped they'd approve of what I was about to do. The charity event continued in the foyer as I carried out trays of food, playing my role perfectly. I watched Emma hold court, describing her philanthropic vision to reporters who hung on her every word. She was beautiful, I'd give her that. Perfect blonde hair, perfect skin, perfect smile. The golden child. The favored one, the fraud. Everything Emma had, her admission to Whitmore University, her internship at father's company, her position on the boards of 3 major charities, had been built on my stolen credentials. She'd plagiarized my essays for her college applications, used my volunteer hours as her own. Even the award-winning charity work she was so famous for was based on a proposal I'd written for Arte, a high school project, a proposal she'd found in my room and presented as her own idea. In my previous life, I'd discovered the theft too late. By the time I'd gathered proof, they'd already started planning my murder. The car accident had been their solution to my inconvenient questions about the trust fund and Emma's suspicious similarities to my own academic work. This time, I documented everything. Every plagiarized essay, every stolen idea, every forged signature on donation forms that routed charity money into Emma's private accounts. My stepsister wasn't just a liar, she was a thief and a fraud, and I had proof that would hold up in any court. Meredith, Patricia's sharp voice again. Emma needs her coat. Go fetch it from her room. I nodded and set down my tray, heading upstairs. Emma's room, the room that had once been meant for a library, according to my mother's plans for the house, was a monument to excess. Designer clothes overflowed from her closet. Jewelry worth more than most people's cars lay scattered across her dresser. Shopping bags from that morning's spree covered her bed, all of it purchased with money stolen from me. I found her coat and took my time returning, listening to the conversation below. Emma's just remarkable, one reporter was gushing. Starting a charity at 19, raising over $100,000 in just 6 months. You must be so proud. We are, Patricia purred. She's always had such a generous heart, not like some young people today who only care about themselves. The implication was clear, even if they didn't speak my name. I was the selfish one, the ungrateful one, the one who didn't understand the value of giving back. I descended the stairs slowly, my face carefully neutral. Emma took her coat from me without a word of thanks, without even looking at me. I was furniture to her, less than furniture. At least furniture served a purpose. Will you be featuring Emma in the profile? My father asked the lead reporter. Douglas Westbrook, my father, was a handsome man of 52, silver-haired and distinguished, CEO of Westbrook Industries, a manufacturing company he'd inherited from his father. A company that was, unknown to him, slowly being hollowed out by his business partner Marcus Hale. The same Marcus Hale who was sleeping with Emma and who'd helped plan my murder in my previous life. Absolutely, the reporter confirmed. The piece will run in next month's issue. The new face of young philanthropy. Emma's going to be our cover story. Emma's smile could have lit up the city. I'm so honored. I just hope I can inspire other young people to care about making a difference. I felt bile rise in my throat, but I kept my expression serene. Let her have this moment. Let her think she'd won. The higher she climbed, the more devastating her fall would be. The event wrapped up an hour later. The reporters left with their story, Emma went out to celebrate with friends, and Patricia retired to her room with a headache. My father disappeared into his study with a glass of scotch. I waited until midnight, then slipped out of the house through the kitchen door. My car, a modest used Honda I'd bought with my own money, the existence of which I'd carefully hidden from my family, was parked 3 blocks away. I drove carefully through the dark streets to an all-night office supply store, where I printed 300 copies of a very specific document. Then I drove to Whitmore University. Emma's crowning achievement, her ticket to a glittering future, was her acceptance to Whitmore, one of the most prestigious universities in the country. She'd been admitted on a full scholarship based on her exceptional academic record and demonstrated commitment to community service. All lies, all built on my stolen work. The university was quiet at this hour, but I knew exactly where to go. In my previous life, I'd visited Emma here once, back when I'd still been foolish enough to hope we could have some kind of relationship. She'd treated me like trash, introduced me to her friends as my stepsister, the one who couldn't get into college, even though I'd never applied because I'd been too busy trying to survive at home. This time, I had a different purpose. I spent 3 hours carefully placing documents everywhere that mattered. The admissions office, the scholarship committee bulletin board, the dean's office, the student ethics board. Each document was a side-by-side comparison. Emma's application essays next to my original work, complete with timestamps and metadata proving which came first. Her volunteer hours next to my own documentation showing I'd done the work she'd claimed. Her charity proposal next to my original high school project, complete with my teacher's comments and grading. I also left copies in the campus newspaper office, the student government office, and taped to every bulletin board in the main student center. By morning, everyone at Whitmore University would know that Emma Westbrook was a fraud, but I wasn't done. From the university, I drove to the offices of the 3 charities Emma served on the board of. The dawn was just breaking as I used the access codes I'd carefully obtained, thank you, social engineering, and a few well-placed bribes to enter each building and leave packages on specific desks. These packages contained comprehensive financial audits I'd commissioned from a private forensic accountant, showing exactly how Emma had been embezzling from the charity funds. Small amounts, careful amounts, but illegal nonetheless. I also included evidence of her affair with Marcus Hale, including explicit text messages and photos I'd obtained through means I preferred not to think about too carefully. Not because the affair was illegal, Emma was 19, Marcus was 45, both adults technically, but because Marcus was married to a woman who served on the board of all three charities. A woman who had considerable social and political power. A woman who would not take kindly to learning her husband was sleeping with a teenager he'd helped embezzle charity funds. The personal would become political, the political would become legal, and Emma's perfect life would unravel thread by thread. I returned home as the sun rose, slipping back into the house undetected. Maria had already left for her vacation. I'd seen her taxi pulling away as I'd parked my car. Good. She was safe now. I showered, dressed, and came down to breakfast as if nothing had happened. Patricia was already at the table, flipping through a magazine. Emma wasn't up yet. She never was before 10. My father had left early for the office, as usual. Toast and coffee for you? Patricia asked without looking up. It wasn't a kindness. She just didn't want to be bothered with me asking for anything more complicated. Thank you, I said quietly, taking my seat. My phone, my real phone, buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Phase 1 complete. Packages delivered as instructed. K. I deleted the message immediately. K was Catherine Chen, a private investigator I'd hired 6 months ago using my hidden funds. Former FBI, impeccable credentials, completely loyal to whoever paid her. She'd been instrumental in gathering evidence and executing several parts of my plan that required a professional touch. Phase 1 was the public destruction. Emma's academic fraud and embezzlement would be exposed by noon today. By evening, she'd be a pariah. Phase 2 would begin tomorrow. The legal destruction. Criminal charges, civil suits, everything. Phase 3 was my favorite. The personal destruction. Everything they'd taken from me, I would take from them. Everything they'd built on my stolen foundation, I would burn to the ground. But Phase 2 required something special, something I'd been cultivating very carefully. My phone buzzed again, this time a calendar reminder. 2 p.m., meeting with grandmother's lawyers. Yes, it was time. I excused myself from the table and went to my room to prepare. In my closet, hidden behind a false panel I'd installed myself, was a garment bag containing the clothes I'd need. Not the thrift store hand-me-downs and clearance rack basics my step-family allowed me. Real clothes, tailored, expensive, appropriate for who I really was, who I was about to reveal myself to be. At 1:30, I left the house again, this time through the front door. Patricia was on the phone with her country club friends, too absorbed in gossip to notice me. I drove my modest Honda to a parking garage downtown, then walked 2 blocks to an elite private building that housed several law firms. The receptionist at Caldwell & Associates looked at me skeptically when I approached. I couldn't blame her. In my carefully chosen disguise of cheap clothes and minimal makeup, I looked like someone who'd taken a wrong turn off the bus. I have a 2:00 appointment, I said quietly. Meredith Westbrook? Her expression changed instantly. Of course, Ms. Westbrook. They're expecting you in the executive conference room, top floor. The elevator ride felt eternal. When the doors opened, I was greeted by 3 lawyers I'd spoken with only over encrypted video calls until now. Thomas Caldwell, senior partner, Vivian Rodriguez, estate specialist, and James Park, corporate litigation expert. Ms. Westbrook, Thomas said warmly, shaking my hand. It's wonderful to finally meet you in person. Your grandmother spoke of you often. She'd be very proud of how you've handled your inheritance. I felt tears prick my eyes. Thank you. Is everything ready? Everything. Vivian gestured to a conference table covered with documents. We've spent the last 2 years preparing exactly as you instructed. The evidence has been compiled. The charges are ready to be filed. We have cooperation from the FBI, the IRS, and the State Attorney General's office. We're just waiting for your final authorization. I looked at the documents. Years of theft, documented in meticulous detail. Forged signatures on trust fund withdrawals, bribed officials, Shell companies used to launder stolen money, tax evasion, wire fraud, and in a separate section marked sealed, attempted murder, evidence of the plot to kill me. The car they'd tampered with had been crushed and recycled in my previous life, but in this one, I'd discovered the plot early enough to have the vehicle thoroughly examined by experts before any attempt was made. The cut brake lines, the tampered steering column, the disabled airbags, all documented, and the money trail leading from my father's accounts to the mechanic who'd done the work, complete with text messages explicitly discussing making sure the girl doesn't survive. I'd let them think they'd succeeded in their initial attempt. After the car had been examined and documented, I'd staged a minor accident that looked serious enough to justify the car being totaled and scrapped, but not serious enough to hurt me. They thought I'd simply been lucky. They didn't know I'd been wearing a recording device when my father and Patricia had discussed the disappointing failure of their plan. "There's one more thing," I said. "My father's company, Westbrook Industries." "How bad is it?" James opened another folder. "Worse than you thought. Marcus Hale has been systematically embezzling for 3 years. He's also been setting your father up to take the fall. Documents with your father's forged signature authorizing illegal payments. Offshore accounts in your father's name. When this breaks, your father will likely face criminal charges for Hale's crimes unless we can prove he was being set up." I considered this. My father had chosen Patricia over me. He'd allowed my abuse. He'd signed off on my murder. Part of me wanted him to suffer for Hale's crimes too, but another part of me, the part that remembered a younger father who'd once pushed me on swings and called me his princess, wanted him to know the truth, to see what his weakness had cost him, to live with the knowledge that he'd destroyed his only child for nothing. Separate the evidence, I decided. File charges against Hale independently. Make sure it's clear my father was a victim of his fraud, but don't file those charges until after the other charges against my father go through. Let him sweat in jail for a few days thinking he's going down for everything. Then and only then, let him know that some of it wasn't even his crime. Thomas nodded approvingly. Calculated mercy. Your grandmother taught you well. Had she? I'd never known her as anything but a dying woman in a hospital bed. But I'd spent 2 years researching her life, reading her journals, learning from her example. She'd escaped an abusive husband, built a business empire, protected her daughter and granddaughter with trusts and legal structures that had survived even her death. She'd taught me, even from beyond the grave, that survival wasn't enough. Victory required strategy, power required patience, and revenge required precision. File everything, I said. Fuad, all charges, all evidence. I want them arrested by tomorrow morning. Consider it done. We spent the next 3 hours going over every detail. The criminal charges would be filed tonight, with arrests scheduled for dawn tomorrow. Simultaneously, I would file civil suits to recover every penny they'd stolen, plus damages and interest. The house they'd taken from my mother would be returned to me. The trust fund they'd looted would be restored, and Westbrook Industries would be restructured under my control as the sole legitimate heir. By the time I left the law office, it was nearly 6 in the evening. I checked my phone and saw 17 missed calls from Patricia and 12 from Emma, 6 voicemails, 23 texts, all variations of the same message. Where are you? Come home now! How dare you embarrass this family? I smiled and deleted them all. Then I checked the news on my phone. The headlines were better than I'd hoped. Whitmore University student Emma Westbrook accused of academic fraud. Charity board member under investigation for embezzlement. Plagiarism scandal rocks young philanthropist's career. And, most deliciously, from a campus gossip blog, popular student Emma W. exposed as complete fake, receipts inside. The receipts were my documents, photographed and shared across every social media platform. Emma's face was everywhere, paired with my original work. The evidence was irrefutable. The court of public opinion had already rendered its verdict. My phone buzzed with a new call. Patricia, I answered this time. Where the hell are you, Basari? She screamed before I could even say hello. Do you have any idea what's happening? Emma's been expelled. The university is threatening to sue her. The charities are demanding her resignation. There are reporters camped outside our house. Fix this. You fix this right now. I let the silence stretch for a long moment. Then, very calmly, I said, "Why would I fix it? Emma's the one who committed fraud and embezzlement. She's the one who stole my work and claimed it as her own. She did this to herself." "Don't you dare," Patricia hissed. "Don't you dare pretend this is about justice. You planted those documents. You sabotaged your own sister." "Stepsister," I corrected. "And I didn't sabotage her. I exposed her. There's a difference. If she hadn't stolen my work in the first place, there'd be nothing to expose." "You ungrateful little bitch," Patricia spat. "After everything we've done for you." "Everything you've done for me?" I laughed, and it felt good. Liberating. "You stole my inheritance. You treated me like a servant in my own home. You tried to kill me. And you think I'm ungrateful?" Silence. Then, in a much quieter, more dangerous voice, "What did you just say?" "I know about the car," I said. "I know about the brakes. I know about the mechanic. I know everything, Patricia. And tomorrow morning, the police will know too." I hung up before she could respond. My phone immediately started buzzing again, but I turned it off. Let them panic. Let them scramble. Let them feel, for one night, the same helpless terror I'd felt in my previous life when I realized my own family wanted me dead. I drove to a hotel downtown, checking in under a false name. I'd sleep here tonight, safe and untouchable, while my family's world collapsed around them. In the morning, I ordered room service and watched the news on TV while I ate breakfast. The story had gone national overnight. Emma Westbrook, daughter of prominent businessman Douglas Westbrook, is facing multiple investigations tonight after evidence emerged suggesting she plagiarized the work of her stepsister to gain admission to Whitmore University. Forensic accounting has revealed that up to $70,000 may have been embezzled from 3 separate charities. Marcus Hale, business partner of Douglas Westbrook and husband to prominent philanthropist Catherine Hale, is also under investigation for his alleged involvement in the embezzlement scheme. The dominoes were falling perfectly. At 8 a.m., my new phone, the one I'd registered under my own name, with my own money, that my family didn't know existed, rang. Thomas Caldwell. "It's done," he said simply. "All 3 of them were arrested an hour ago. Your father at his office, Patricia at home, Emma at a friend's apartment where she'd been hiding. They're being processed now." "And the evidence?" "Delivered to the prosecutors. They're already calling it one of the most comprehensive fraud and attempted murder cases they've seen. Your family won't be making bail. The attempted murder charge makes them flight risks." I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. It was really happening. After 2 years of planning, of playing weak, of swallowing my rage and pretending to be the victim they thought I was, justice was finally arriving. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank your grandmother," Thomas said gently. "She set all this up before she died. The separate trusts, the hidden accounts, the dead man's switches in her will. She knew your father was weak. She knew a second wife might try to steal from you. She protected you even after death." Tears ran down my cheeks. I wish I'd known her better. You're more like her than you know. After we hung up, I sat in the hotel room for a long time, processing everything. My family was in jail. My stepsister's life was ruined. My stepmother's reputation was destroyed. My father's business was about to be torn apart. And I was free. I checked out of the hotel at noon and drove to my family's house. My house, legally, since it had been purchased with my mother's money and held in a trust. There were no reporters out front anymore. They'd moved on to covering the arrests. The house was empty and silent. I walked through it slowly, seeing it with new eyes. The foyer where Emma had posed with Mr. Buttons. The kitchen where I'd been treated like a servant. The stairs I'd crept up and down trying to be invisible. The room they'd given me, barely larger than a closet with a window that didn't close properly and a radiator that never worked. Next to it, Emma's palatial suite, with its walk-in closet and private bathroom and sitting area. I smiled coldly and got to work. By evening, I'd changed every lock in the house. I'd packed up all of Emma's belongings and Patricia's belongings and had them moved to a storage unit. They could retrieve them after they made bail, if they made bail. I'd reclaimed my old room, the one that had been meant for me before Patricia had suggested I'd be happier in the small room, and I'd found Mr. Buttons in a donation box in the garage, waiting to be picked up by the charity. I pulled him out carefully, checking for damage. The bear was worn but intact, my grandmother's careful stitches still holding strong. I held him close and let myself cry. For the girl I'd been. For the girl I'd had to become. For the grandmother I'd barely known, but who'd loved me enough to protect me even from beyond the grave. When I was done crying, I made myself dinner in my own kitchen, in my own house, with no one to serve, no one to cater to, no one to fear. I ate slowly, savoring every bite of food I didn't have to share or justify or apologize for wanting. Then I went to my new room, my real room, and slept better than I had in 2 lifetimes. The trials took months. The evidence was so overwhelming that all 3 of them ended up taking plea deals rather than risk longer sentences at trial. Emma pled guilty to academic fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit fraud. She was sentenced to 4 years in prison and ordered to pay back everything she'd stolen, plus damages. Her conviction meant she'd never attend another university, never hold another position of public trust, never rebuild the golden reputation she'd worked so hard to cultivate on my stolen foundation. Patricia pled guilty to wire fraud, identity theft, forgery, conspiracy to commit fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. She was sentenced to 25 years. At 57, she'd be 82 when she got out, if she got out. Her beauty, her social position, her carefully curated life, all gone. My father's case was more complicated. He pled guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and received 15 years, but the fraud charges related to Marcus Hale's embezzlement were dismissed when evidence proved he'd been set up. It was a small mercy, but one I'd chosen to give him, not out of love that had died in my previous life, but out of a desire to let him know with perfect clarity exactly what he'd lost and why. Marcus Hale, facing evidence of embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder, hanged himself in his jail cell before trial. Catherine Hale, his widow, sent me a fruit basket and a note thanking me for exposing her husband's crimes. The fruit basket was impressive, but the note was better. She'd also liquidated all of Marcus's assets and donated the proceeds to legitimate charities in my name. The trials were publicized extensively. Every detail of my abuse came out in court. The years of neglect, the stolen inheritance, the academic fraud, the murder plot. Emma tried to claim she hadn't known about the murder plot, and maybe that was even true, but the jury didn't care. She'd participated in the fraud. She'd benefited from my suffering. That was enough. I testified at all 3 trials. I told my story clearly, calmly, without embellishment. I didn't need to embellish. The facts were damning enough. When the sentencing was complete, I stood outside the courthouse and faced the cameras I'd once been invisible to. I want to say something to anyone out there who's suffering the way I suffered, I said, looking directly into the nearest lens. To anyone who feels invisible, who feels worthless, who's been told by their own family that they don't matter. You do matter. Your life has value. Your pain is real, and you deserve justice. I paused, gathering my thoughts. My grandmother, before she died, told me something I didn't understand at the time. She said, "Strength isn't about being unbreakable. It's about breaking and choosing to rebuild yourself anyway." I broke. My family broke me. But I chose to rebuild, and when I did, I made sure I was too strong to be broken again. The reporter closest to me asked, "Do you feel you got justice today?" I considered the question. Justice is complicated. My family is going to prison? Yes. They're paying for their crimes legally and socially. But the years I lost, the childhood I should have had, the love I should have received, those are gone. Forever. No verdict can give that back to me. So, was it worth it? Another reporter asked. The effort you put into exposing them, the pain of the trials, all of it? I smiled. Yes, because I'm not just getting justice for myself, I'm getting it for every victim of family abuse who never got their day in court. Every child who's been neglected or stolen from, or worse. I'm proving that perpetrators can be held accountable even when they're your own blood, especially when they're your own blood. The footage went viral. Within days, I was being called a hero, an inspiration, a symbol of survival and resilience. Abuse survivors reached out to me from around the world, sharing their own stories, thanking me for speaking up. I never wanted to be a public figure, but I'd learned from Emma's fake charity work that influence, when used correctly, could change lives. So I started a foundation, a real one, funded with my own money, run by professionals with actual experience in charity work. We helped abuse survivors escape dangerous situations, provided legal support, funded therapy, offered job training and education assistance. I called it the Margaret Westbrook Foundation, after my grandmother. She would have liked that. Westbrook Industries, freed from Marcus Hale's corruption and my father's mismanagement, was restructured under my control. I hired a professional management team to run the day-to-day operations while I focused on the foundation. The company became profitable again within a year, and I used those profits to fund more charitable work. The house, my mother's house, was renovated top to bottom. I erased every trace of Patricia's influence, replacing her cold, showy aesthetic with something warm and comfortable. I hired a new staff, paying them fair wages and treating them with respect. Maria came back as head of household management, and her sister joined her to help. Emma's room became a library, as my mother had originally planned. Patricia's suite became a guest room. My father's study was converted into my office. I reclaimed every inch of space they'd taken from me. Mr. Buttons sat on a shelf in the library, carefully preserved in a glass case. I visited him often, telling him about my days, my victories, my plans. Talking to a stuffed bear was probably silly for a woman of 19, then 20, then 21. But I didn't care. He was the last physical piece of my grandmother, the only thing that had survived both my lives intact. On the 2-year anniversary of my family's arrest, I visited them in prison for the first time since the trials. Emma looked terrible. Prison had stripped away her beauty like acid. Her hair was dull, her skin was sallow, her eyes were hard and bitter. She glared at me through the glass partition. "Come to gloat?" she asked. "No," I said honestly, I came to tell you something." "What? That you've won? That you've destroyed my life? I already know that, Meredith." "I came to tell you that I forgive you." She blinked, confused. "What?" "I forgive you," I repeated. "Not because you deserve it. You don't. Not because I'm trying to be noble or generous. I'm not. But because holding on to hatred for you, for Patricia, for my father, it's like drinking poison and expecting you to die. I'm done poisoning myself." Emma's expression twisted into something ugly. "I don't want your forgiveness." "I know, but I needed to give it. For me, not for you." I stood up. "Goodbye, Emma. I won't be back." I visited Patricia next. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by prison in a way Emma wasn't. Patricia had always derived her power from her beauty, her social position, her ability to manipulate and charm. Stripped of all that, she was just a middle-aged woman who'd made terrible choices. "You shouldn't have come," Patricia said quietly. There's nothing left to say." "I know, but I wanted to see you one last time. To see if I'd feel—" I trailed off, searching for the right word. "Satisfied?" Patricia supplied bitterly. "Something like that." I studied her through the glass. "I don't, though. I don't feel anything at all when I look at you now. You're just a stranger who hurt me once. That's all you are to me anymore." Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "I never wanted it to go this far. At first, I just wanted the money. For Emma. For her future. I thought you'd be fine. You were Douglas's daughter. You'd inherit eventually anyway. I didn't think it mattered if we took a little early." "A little," I repeated. "You took $10 million. You tried to kill me. That's not a little, Patricia." "I know." She wiped her eyes. "I know, and I'm sorry. If that means anything." It didn't, but I nodded anyway. Goodbye, Patricia. My father was last. Of all of them, he looked the most broken. Guilt, I supposed, worked differently on him than on the women who'd manipulated him. He'd loved my mother once. He'd loved me once. Then he'd let that love die, replaced it with weakness and complacency, and in the end, he'd tried to murder his own daughter for money and peace. Meredith, he said, his voice cracking. Please, I need you to understand. No, I cut him off. I don't need to understand. You made your choices. You chose Patricia over me. You chose money over my life. Those were your decisions, and you're paying for them now. I was weak, he said. I was so weak. After your mother died, I didn't know how to be strong for you, and Patricia was there. And she seemed so sure of everything, and I just let her lead. You let her lead you into trying to kill me, I said flatly. Your only child, your daughter, the last piece of mom you had left, and you tried to murder me for an insurance payout. He sobbed, actually sobbed, right there in the visiting room. I didn't think it would really happen. Marcus said he'd just scare you, make it look like an accident, but you'd be fine. And then when it actually happened, when you died, he choked on the words. I couldn't live with myself. I started drinking. I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing your face. I didn't die, I said coldly. I survived, and I remembered everything. I know, and I'm glad. God, Meredith, I'm so glad you survived. He pressed his hand against the glass. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I don't deserve anything from you, but I need you to know that I loved your mother. I love you. I never stopped loving you, even when I was too weak to show it. I stared at his hand on the glass. In another life, maybe I would have matched his gesture. Maybe I would have told him I forgave him too. But that life was gone. And the woman I'd become didn't have room for mercy toward the man who'd tried to kill her. I'm glad Mom isn't here to see what you became, I said quietly. It would have broken her heart. I left him crying. The years passed. My foundation grew, helping thousands of abuse survivors escape and rebuild their lives. Westbrook Industries expanded into new markets, always ethically, always with fair labor practices. I became known not as Douglas Westbrook's daughter or the victim who'd survived, but as Meredith Westbrook, philanthropist and businesswoman in my own right. I dated occasionally, but never seriously. Trust was hard after everything I'd been through. Maybe someday I'd meet someone who could understand, who could look at my scars, invisible as they were, and not flinch. But I wasn't in a hurry. I had time, I had money, I had power, I had purpose. I had everything my family had tried to take from me, and more. On the 5-year anniversary of my rebirth, the day I'd woken up in the hospital at 15 with memories of my previous life, I threw a private party. Just me, Maria, her sister, and a few close friends I'd made over the years. People who knew my story and liked me anyway. People who saw me as more than my trauma or my triumph. We ate good food, drank good wine, and laughed about silly things. Normal things. We didn't talk about the trials or the prison sentences or the foundation. We talked about books and movies and travel plans. We talked about life. That night, alone in my room, I took Mr. Buttons out of his case and held him close. We did it, Grandma, I whispered. We won. I felt foolish talking to a teddy bear, but also peaceful, complete. The little girl who'd died thinking she was worthless had been avenged. The woman I'd become had built something meaningful from the ashes of that death. I thought about Emma in prison, about Patricia's tears, about my father's regret. Part of me still felt satisfaction at their suffering. I wasn't sane enough to deny that. But increasingly, what I felt was simply distance. They were part of my past, but they didn't define my present. They'd hurt me terribly, and I'd made them pay for it. And now we were all moving forward on separate paths that would never cross again. That was enough. That was justice. Not the Hollywood version where everyone learns and grows and reconciles, just the real version where bad people face consequences and victims get to move on. I put Mr. Buttons back in his case and opened my laptop. There was work to do: a new shelter to fund, a legal case to support, a survivor who needed help escaping an abusive marriage. The work never ended. There would always be more victims, more perpetrators, more injustice to fight. But now, unlike in my previous life, I had the power to fight it. I had the resources. I had the knowledge. I had the strength I'd built from breaking and rebuilding myself. I had everything. My family had given me nothing, not love, not support, not even my own childhood teddy bear. They'd taken everything they could from me, including my life. But I'd been reborn with a gift they couldn't steal: knowledge of who they really were. And I'd used that knowledge to take back what was mine and build something they could never imagine. They'd given Emma my teddy bear, my identity, my future. After my rebirth, I never asked them to keep anything. I took it all back myself, and I won.